Hey, Soraya, welcome to the Steve Wynn Paisley Stage Raspberry and Rhyme episode.
I like it. Sounds really good.
It does sound good. So, about a month and a half ago, we talked to Steve about the Down There record label that Steve started and operated with the help of Russ Tolman, we learned. And during that conversation, or before that conversation, and preparing for that, Steve had a recommendation for us, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
And a suggestion or a request, I should say, to
Right.
to run the show. So he's going to run today's show. So I think we're going to be more of observers than anything today, Soraya.
I'm okay with it. I like to learn all the time. So I
Yeah.
have a feeling today's guest will do just that. Do you want to let our listeners know, besides Steve Wynn, our guest host,
Yes.
who are we having on the podcast today?
Yes. So Steve requested that we talk to Tom Gracyk. So Tom, I only knew Tom as an employee of Freakbeat Records, formerly of Moby Disc Records.
Right.
But according to Steve, Tom is ground zero for Paisley Underground. So I think we're in for learning something today.
I think you're right.
Yeah, I have seen Tom's name on photo credits for a number of record albums, including records from Russ Tolman, Dream Syndicate. I got a little list here: Gutterball, Concrete Blonde, Ghost House. So he's taken some pictures, and also he's got some pictures in this new book, Go Further, more literary appreciations of power pop. Oh, you got a copy too. Nice. So Steve's going to run the show today. It looks like Steve and Tom are on the line, so we'll let them enter this room and see what happens. And at the end of the show, we're hoping to learn a little bit more about the Dream Syndicate recordings, a little bit more about Tom's book. I don't know if we'll talk about that during Steve's conversation, but at the end. And then hopefully we can push Steve to learn a little bit about his house concerts, which should be happening by the time this posts, and maybe a little bit about the documentary, the Dream Syndicate documentary. But I don't know what's going to happen today. This is Steve's show. So.
Well, welcome everyone to the Steve Wynn show. And I was going to say Steve Wynn hour, but who knows how long it'll go.
Right.
Let's get started. Hi, this is Soraya.
And this is Jeff,
Our podcast is called Paisley Stage Raspberry and Rhyme.
a podcast where the two of us play music that we like and share anecdotes and background about the tunes.
We hope you'll join our conversation. And without further ado, a grooviar.
Let's get groovy.
Soraya, today on Paisley Stage Raspberry and Rhyme, we have Steve Wynn as a co-host today, and I'm not sure what we're in for today. Of course, Steve from a number of projects, most notably Dream Syndicate, Gutterball, Baseball Project, his solo stuff. I mean, the list is endless, right? We talked to Steve about his work with the Down There record label, which was very interesting. I loved that conversation. But Steve has a different path for us today, and he's going to be taking the driver's seat. We're going to step into the back. I'm sure we're going to have questions and we might interject, of course. But today we've got Steve Wynn as our co-host. Steve, take it away.
Okay. And yeah, I've been a guest on the show, and you know how much I love the show, what you guys are doing. And I've been kind of nagging you on and off over since you began about the unsung hero, one of the great unsung heroes of the scene. And every music scene has some unsung hero. I was thinking today about maybe whoever the guy who was booking the Star Club in Hamburg brought the Beatles over. That guy, had a lot to do with what happened after that, and other scenes like that as well. Well, Tom Gracyk is, in my mind, ground zero, unsung hero number one of Paisley Underground, without whom maybe none of this would happen. And let me make a case for that before we start talking to the great and soon not to be unheralded Tom Gracyk. And I started going to school at UC Davis in 1977 when I was 17 years old, and this was a great, exciting time for music, because when punk rock kind of flourishing, getting into full swing. And And like a lot of people at that time, I got caught up in that and loved it and was excited about it. And I started writing reviews for the UC Davis newspaper, the Aggie. And through doing that, I met Tom Gracyk, who was the resident music critic at the paper. And Tom was, still is actually a little older than me, as a matter of fact. And strangely enough. And he was kind of, he was already in the scene as a music critic and working at KDBS, the radio station there. And over the next couple of years, Tom was, as music director, really shaped the sound of KDBS. It became a station that went from being what at the time we thought was the uncool direction of hippie music. Turns out now it's music that I'm probably more influenced by than anything. They were playing things like Noy and Can and Faust. We had to, and stuff like that. We had to get rid of that stuff and bring in punk rock. and Tom was a gigantic influence through his great musical knowledge and taste, and being hip to things that at the time were completely unknown. I think of Big Star off the top of my head that he was talking about before anybody even knew who they were. Tom turned us onto this music, and by us I mean myself, Ken Smith, who was my bandmate in the Dream Syndicate, Russ Tolman, who formed True West. We were all DJs there under Tom's tutelage. Scott Miller, who was living in Game Theory, who was living in Davis, listening to KDVS. Guy Kaiser, the kid, who was our guitar roadie and eventually became a DJ and then formed Thin White Rope. This was an amazing circle of musicians. And Tom was the guy we looked to turn us on to all music. He knew his stuff. And he was, I'm speaking of you as though you're not here, Tom, but he was hip to free jazz and everything we'd want to discover, and would sort of almost dole it out to us in time where we were as students in music, and that had a lot to do with shaping what we all ended up doing. And now Tom, skipping forward, is Tom. I don't know what to say. Are you would I say the manager or a Freak Beat? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, Bob Say is the owner operator, although that makes him sound like a long haul trucker. And so
He's kind of
say that I'm the manager.
Okay.
Yeah, he was a lifer.
So there you go. So Tom Gracyk was the manager of the great Freak Beat record store in the San Fernando Valley, Los Angeles, that I'm sure a lot of you have been to or shopped at. And in between, less stories to tell. He's worked Moby Disc Records, and
you got me the job at Moby Disc Records.
That's right.
Of course, it's all Steve's fault. Steve got me started down this path. I had never worked retail before. And Steve, I was living in Berkeley after graduating from college. Just rather Ripped Records would not hire me. I was trying to get a job as a DJ somewhere, but that wasn't panning out. And Steve said, "Hey, I'm working at this store called Moby Disc. I think I could get you a job if you want to move down here." And yeah, I'm still in some ways there.
for 40 plus years later. And that
yes.
and that was 1980.
1980,
right. So
yeah.
I had just moved back to LA. It was still another year plus, a little over a year before I'd formed the Dream Syndicate, and I was going to school at UCLA and working at Moby Disc. But that's going forward. I want to circle back primarily, first of all, to those years in Davis. And I really, Tom, I can't emphasize enough. I've wanted to make this case for so long, how much, I feel like all of us were into music, Russ, Tom, all the people I named, we were all into cool stuff, but we needed some context, some way to kind of let that flourish, to learn about what we were going to be learning, to go from just, well, I'm into the Who and the Beatles and the Kinks, to be able to say I'm into all this crazy stuff. And you really kind of led us along. Is this fair to say? Am I overselling you?
Well, it's always the case where you would have picked something up somewhere along the way along these lines. But yeah, I definitely was channeling a lot of this music into people at the radio station. That was kind of my job. And before that, at the Cal Davis Aggie, writing for the newspaper, I mainly wanted to get free records, but I also wanted to write about things that people wanted to listen or should be listening to. And when you say that we got onto KDVS to steer them away from playing Noy and Can, no, the way I see it, they just wanted to be another version of KZAP, which was the AOR station out of Sacramento.
Oh, KZAP.
And they were playing Linda Ronstadt and Jack. They were playing all the LA Mafia stuff.
Oh,
Eagles. Oh, it was the worst.
I give them
the kind of music that
too much credit. My God.
Yeah, there weren't that. I mean, there were a couple people there who were hip, especially some of the older guys that were on the jazz tip, and they kind of got me started, because when I met them, they're like, "Oh, you know about Anthony Braxton? Oh, well, and you know about the Ramones? Oh, hey, why don't you come down and hang out?" Just as many years later, I remember Guy Kaiser coming down to hang out during my show. He's sitting there, very quiet guy. He had these huge boots. We thought he was a farmer. He was from, where was he? Ridgecrest or Trona?
Ridgecrest, and he ended up being a farmer essentially.
Yes, he ended up being a agricultural scientist, which is why you would be in Davis in the first place.
Right.
That's where you learn how to tip cows.
Tip cows. I mean, but and the thing is, this whole thing while it was happening, while you were just ahead of this curve, but in that time, a lot was going on in Davis with Peter Afterman booking the coffee house and bringing in. I've spoken of this in previous interviews, but incredible. We were so lucky to be in this small town where we got to see the likes of Devo and the Ramones and Elvis Costello and Iggy and XTC, et cetera, in a tiny 250 capacity coffee house. And I feel like what was it like? I mean, it's one thing for me to say I started going there in 1977 when things were already rocking. You started being involved in the paper and the radio station in 76. Is that right?
No, I didn't start till 77.
Oh, no kidding. I'm learning a lot here.
Yeah, things weren't really rocking that much. Like I say, I can remember sniffing around the radio station, talking to the music director at the time, and he was opening his mail. And I remember he got they used to get a lot of 7-inch singles promos in the mail to play, to consider, because they reported to the Gavin report, which was unusual, but the station had 5,000 watts of power. So they were on one of the few college stations who were getting all these singles. And I remember he opened up a Ramones record and he threw it in the trash. I mean, he literally opened it up. God. He said, "This is garbage." He threw it in his wastebasket. And I just said, "I got to fix this, man. This is totally wrong. I'm tired of hearing Little Feat. I love Little Feat. We love Little Feat." At the time, though, all that music was on the decline. And, there was so much good new music starting to come through. And I just said, well, here's a chance. If I can get into this radio station, I mean, maybe I can play good music and or stuff I want to hear. Just like I had been reviewing Perubu at the Cal Aggie.
Right.
And at the time I thought, well, I don't know if anybody cares about this, but it was my contribution to whatever the scene was. I wasn't a musician, but I definitely wanted to contribute. And that was the start, doing record reviews and concert reviews at the Cal Aggie, and then getting on to KDVS, and then meeting all the people. They weren't all younger than me. I think actually Russ, is a year older than me, and we have some similar background. And we grew up listening to Quicksilver Messenger Service and the Rolling Stones and stuff like that. And I think Russ has said, but at this point it's like, oh, Leonard Skinner doesn't seem so hip compared to Elvis Costello or the Damned. And that was the kind of stuff that I definitely, as a music director especially, I said, here are the records that we should be playing. And they used to have the promo stickers on the front that would list each song with a little box next to it. And I would check, a couple of the best songs. And those tended to be the songs that gained some traction. And Russ became music director, and then you were music director.
No.
Sorry, program director.
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
Yeah. And so the thing is, you guys were picking the young kids, and I was saying, okay, here's the music you want to play. And within a year or two, there was no Linda Ronstadt playing on KDVS. No, because that's what it had been.
And, I mean, now I'm thinking back, because you and I became pretty fast friends, and we just started doing a lot when we became roommates almost in my sophomore year, and we were roommates for a couple of years. So we were hanging out a lot. I'm trying to remember. First of all, were you put off when this kid from LA comes up and starts taking some of those free promo records to review at the Aggie? Was that did you not like that? Did I get under your skin?
I said, what does this sports writer think he's doing, pulling these records?
I was the sports editor at the time. That's right.
And the entertainment editor, Derek Bang, he used an exclamation point at the end of his name.
Yeah.
He said, "Oh, okay, there's the free records, and here's this new guy, Steve Wynn, and you guys sort it out."
And we did.
I didn't pull rank so much, but I do remember the one time. You remember in fall of '77 when Sire put out all those new wave records at once? They had a poster, and I think it was Talking Heads,
Absolutely,
Dead Boys, Saints, maybe the Ramones, and I said,
Richard Hell and
I
the
kind of
Voidoids.
elbowed you. Let's say Richard Hell.
Yeah.
And I was aware of all that. So I'm a big Ramones fan already. And I just said, Steve, I'm going to take these records because I really need to. Yeah. And here, why don't you review this new Todd Rundgren album because you like him.
It's funny. It's funny you should mention that, Tom, because I feel like, and I know you have a cassette of this. I think you've got me on KBS first to do a wrap up of the best music of 1977. And we did that. We co-hosted that. And I was at the I'm not DJ, just like the other Aggie writer. And I've heard that you played that for me or gave me a copy not long ago, and you're giving me a hard time. You're actually like, I'm because you're already got your coolness in place. Where I remember I had on my list the record by Todd Rundgren by Utopia called "Oops, Wrong Planet," and I think you gave me a little bit of grief about that.
Yeah, because of course the big record that year was Television, Marquee Moon. And basically, I was trying to say, "Oh, Steve, put away Genesis and Todd Rundgren and Peter Gabriel, and you gotta check out Television and groups like this." And yeah, we did our rundown of the year, and I remember. But I will admit that it was a learning experience for me the whole time because Cheap Trick was a band that I had ignored up to that point, and you really lobbied for them, and I got to be a big fan, obviously, and so it was a two-way street. I mean, I picked up a few things I didn't know about, and of course, you and some other people brought up an LA sensibility, so you knew about some of the LA bands like X at some point. Yeah. And that was the stuff that I learned about from you guys. So we all were pretty open-minded at the time, but I definitely was trying to open your mind a little bit more.
And you did a good job of it. And you definitely knew things we got into. I remember, for example, like I said, you turning me on to Big Star in 1978, that double record online that ended up.
Big Star Third came out.
And Big Star Third came out. That's right. And the thing is, I remember, at that time, who knew about Big Star? Like you and maybe Peter Holzapfel, and that was it in the whole country. That might have, made.
And probably the guys that rather ripped records where we used to go shopping.
That's true. Yeah.
Ray Farrell would say, "Oh, you guys need this record," and we'd go, "Oh yeah, I've heard about this. Sure." The Residents? No thanks, Ray. We'll pass until next time.
He Ray Farrell was another big unsung hero of that scene. Now, I remember Kendra Smith was at the station before I was, I believe, right? She was there early on.
She was in public affairs.
Right.
Was she public affairs director at one point?
I think so. Did you?
And I can remember.
What do you remember about it?
I remember
at first.
Yeah. The first thing I can remember in an interaction with Kendra, I was doing my show and she was there because she was working on some, farm report. And she came by the booth and I think I was playing Train by the Count Bishops or the 101ers doing Key to My Heart.
Wow.
And she just said, "Hey, what's this music, man? This is really cool. It kind of reminds me of like the Rolling Stones or something." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, here's this new band, and this is great stuff." And next thing you know, she decided to become a DJ, and she met you, and you guys started hanging out a lot.
Right.
Going to shows. We went to a lot of shows, obviously.
Yeah.
And so she went from being public affairs to being the cool chick on the scene.
And she was. And the thing is, I always talk about the scene we had in Davis at the time with you, with all of us hanging out, and that it was such a small scene that we were lucky in a way to be part of doing what we were doing.
Yeah, and
in a really
the coffee house scene wasn't really happening yet. I mean, Peter Afterman hadn't gotten those bands that were coming through, and part of it was the support of KDVS, which we put in place. It was a geographical invention that the coffee house and Freeborn Hall would get. Instead of just Jerry Garcia band, the bands could play if they're playing San Francisco, they could stick around for another day and play Davis or Sacramento. So that's why Davis got a lot of shows, because it was so close to San Francisco.
Oh, yeah. You're trying to fill those days. Believe me, I'm still doing that.
Yeah.
Fill those off days.
Davis was an off day.
Yes,
for
exactly. It's a classic fill-in date. Well, there's a little college town outside of Sacramento that can pay you a little bit of money. You can maybe it'll pay for your hotel. So, okay, we'll take it.
Yeah, but and this just came up recently. I didn't know about this, but you and somebody sent out a link about Sting on the Howard Stern show a few years ago, saying, "Yeah, I owe my whole career to." There were these two radio stations that were playing Roxanne, and one of them was this one station over here, and then there was this college station in Northern California, and the police did come through and play a couple times, and I definitely remember playing Roxanne in our apartment the first time I got the record, and I played it like 6 times in a row, just trying to figure it out and deciding it was just amazing. And I'm not sure if you were on board, but eventually everybody got on board.
I wasn't.
Yeah. But for Sting to remember, oh yeah, UC Davis, they were early supporters. It's like, oh, that's amazing. I mean, you never know what anybody's memory is going to be like, but it's a funny thing. But yeah, that was
talk about unsung hero. I mean, it's always somebody who launches a band's career, and you were a pivotal part.
I'm sorry, everybody. I'm sorry about Mr. Sting.
We're okay with that.
But because we reported it to this Gavin report, then it looked like a hot single for somebody, and it, that was part of the snowball. It's such a minuscule thing, but for me to learn years later that Sting remembered us, it's like, well, I guess it meant something to somebody. That was cool.
Yeah.
But that was it. That was part of my contribution, was trying to channel that stuff out to the listeners. And we had listeners in Sacramento because we were a strong station. Yep. And so there were clubs in Sacramento like Slick Willie's, and later, what was it called? I want to say Stagecoach.
That's later on. Yeah.
But I mean, so these things all snowball.
China Wagon.
The China Wagon. Yeah. And it was just a matter of, it was me and everybody else that I became friends with, and we just channeled everything away from the Eagles towards Elvis Costello.
And there was a music scene there, obviously with my band Suspects, with Kendra and Russ.
Yes, and the couple of Sacramento bands like the Twinkies and Ozzy and the Mumbles. Yeah.
What did you think?
So they were
okay. Now you're obviously friends with people involved there. You know all the people in Suspects, and you see the other bands. Yet you're hip to what's happening around the world, as we all were. What did you think of? And I'm not seeking praise here. What did you think about our weird local scene that ended up being kind of the genesis? Not to bring up Genesis again, because I can see I'm going to get in trouble for that. But
get off of that.
But the genesis of all these Paisley bands. What did you think of the scene in Davis? You can be honest.
It seemed to grow really organically and naturally, and everybody had some talent. I mean, it was 100 people that would get together at most for some shows, not the coffee house shows. When the national acts would come through, that it would be sold out. Mm-hmm. But Devo would be playing, and then they'd come down to the radio station and we'd interview them. And of course, we had promoted all these shows. We didn't promote the Oregon show coming up that much, but when Devo was coming to town, we got all excited.
Oh, yeah.
Iggy Pop was, hey, we're going to be interviewing Iggy Pop here. So he's playing at the coffee house and blah, blah, blah. And so we showed that there was a market for it. And that's why it got booked into the coffee house, a lot of the new wave acts. So it was very organic. It was funny because we used to go to see the Beano Brothers, was that their name, on a Thursday night at what was that hotel that Guy Kaiser ended up living in?
With the Antique Bazaar? No,
Antique Bazaar and places like that. Yeah. So I was thinking about this the other day. I was remembering finding out that you and Kendra were like really into soul music, but you were doing this new wave thing. And I always thought, well, how come you don't? Well, no, you probably shouldn't do any soul songs with your new wave talents.
Yeah, that's
how did you? But you were I remember you guys did a Ramones song. I think you did.
We
Don't
did.
Come Close.
Good memory. We
And
did.
the one I thought, one that was really impressive was "Do Anything You Want to Do."
Yeah.
It's like, wow, that's a big song to try and do. And you pulled it off, and it's like, yeah, this is great. I mean, and then you had all the originals would fit right in with those songs. So I thought it was a good scene.
I mean,
I never doubted it.
We were obviously we were picking up on things. You know, I think the Talking Heads were a big role model for us because you could look at like the Talking Heads and say, yeah, we can kind of do that. We couldn't be a soul band.
Right.
I think as much as we like, as much as we love soul music, that was 5 steps ahead of what we could do. But Psycho Killer, I can pull that off.
Well, I remember on the Suspects record, Russ basically doing the guitar solo was Rock Around the Clock, which I thought was really cool, but it was faster. Am I remembering that right?
You are. That's funny. By the way, Tom, you I should tell the listeners, you and I went to the last Sex Pistols show, both writing about the Aggie, and your face is inside the sleeve
the
of
great rock
the
and
great
roll
rock and roll
swindle.
swindle.
Yes.
You can pick out Tom's face in the crowd scene there. So
and arm.
And
the only
arm.
reason I can pick myself out of the crowd is because I happen to be holding my arm up at that minute. And actually, later editions of the records are missing that photo.
Oh, I don't like that.
So it's not in all. It's kind of like the Bob Dylan Blonde on Blonde. You know how they removed Claudia Cardinale in the original?
No, okay, no.
The Blonde on Blonde, the original gatefold spread had a photo that they had to later remove, just like the Sex Pistols later removed my picture from the gatefold.
Terrible.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That makes me unhappy. Well, I mean, it's funny because like now we had this 3 years in Davis. We were all together there, and doing the station. You say Guy Kaiser was coming up there. I met Scott Miller around that time because he was dating my ex-girlfriend Carolyn, and Carolyn played me the tape that became his first EP. And I said, "Oh my God, this guy's
alternate learning,
right?" And I freaked out over it. And I thought this guy is obviously the biggest Big Star fan ever. And turned out he never heard of Alex Chilton or Big Star. Through you, I was able to turn him on to the music that became his main calling card.
I remember we went over to his house one time, and we were in his bedroom, and that was when he said, "Oh, Big Star, no one ever heard of them." And so we were getting to know him, and then when the first Alternate Learning 7-inch came out with this intricate, elaborate packaging, there were some quotations from some different people in it, and I was quoted anonymously as saying, "Well, obviously they've been listening to Yes."
Really? That's funny.
And it's I only said that because he had a synthesizer.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, synthesizer's bad, guitar's good. And so obviously, and I was thinking about this the other day. You remember for a while the keyboard player was a woman named Lynn Ross,
of course,
who was a DJ. She was a DJ at KDVS. And it was one of those deals. She and I used to dance together at some of these shows. I mean, it was the sort of thing you if you felt like dancing, you'd get up and you'd dance with whoever was enjoying it. And I remember once or twice at an Alternate Learning show, she played keyboards and she would just hit a button, which basically was a sequencer.
Mm-hmm.
And so she jumped off the stage and she ran out to me where I was up front, and we just started dancing around for a minute. And then she just jumped back on stage and continued with the song. And that was so much fun. I mean, that was just part of the scene. It was pretty tight, pretty small, and we were just all having a lot of fun.
Yeah, there wasn't pressure for anybody to be anything. I mean, I think, like I said earlier, I think had we been DJs in Berkeley or LA, or if I had been in a new wave band in LA or San Francisco, or even working in a record store, any of those kinds of things, I think you would have felt more pressure to have your game on right away. And we didn't have to do that. We had the freedom.
But you did work at a record store. You and Kendra worked at Eucalyptus Records in Davis, right?
Yeah. Oh, yes, we did. Eucalyptus Records, where, unlike other record stores I worked at in my life, we had a strict playlist. And you probably know this, Tom, but they had a very strict playlist that we had to follow and never veer away from, maybe 20 records. And I remember the 3 records I could stand on the playlist was Get the Knack and Labor of Love by Nick Lowe, and and The Cars Candy. So three decent records. But I heard those records so many times, I'm amazed I can still listen to them, because probably the next best thing on there was probably Ted Nugent, Intensity in 10 Cities. So like that's how quickly that quality dropped off. We worked there selling mostly screens for hash pipes. That was kind of our main sale item there.
Well, the hip record store was across the street. It was Barney's.
You're right.
And they sold a little bit. I remember I did some street postering for A&M Records for a little while. Bob Garcia was supposedly my boss, and I never met the guy, but they would send me posters, and I'd go to Barney's and do a Joe Jackson display because he had a new record out. And I did that briefly, which I guess that paved the way for thinking about working in a record store. And but Barney's was a little hipper.
Yeah, it was.
But my brothers had actually worked at Eucalyptus Records in Fairfield before you were working. No, maybe at the same time, but it was a little bit hipper in the mid 70s. They used to, I don't know if they actually sold a lot of ECM records, but the guy who was running that place was a barefoot kid who worked with my brother. They were seniors in high school. And that's where in 74, when I just got sick of the Doobie Brothers and the Eagles and stuff like that, and my brother would bring home these records on this label called ECM and Keith Jarrett and John Garbarek. And I was like, yeah, this is pretty cool stuff. And he also would bring home the Ramones and Patti Smith. And so that's where I was able to hear a lot of that stuff, because you might read about it in Cream, but there was no radio that was playing it. Even a hip station like KSAN out of San Francisco, they were still playing Van Morrison and the Rolling Stones, which is great. That's what I grew up on. But other than Howie Klein's Outcast Hour, they weren't. And that, again, that was later.
That was later.
That's where you would hear you would hear the Nuns and the Sex Pistols and hear about the Mabuhay Gardens. But even by then, I think I was about to do my radio show, Shake Some Action, which was the punk and new wave outlet in Davis.
Oh yes. I mean, every time I always say, like, hearing the song "Shake Some Action" is like a Pavlovian thing for me, because whenever I hear that, I think your show is starting. It's just like it really does. It brings back memories of, because of course, besides being your roommate, you also, I would listen to your show just to get turned on to things. So hearing the sound of that song always told me good things are coming. It's like, here we go. We're going to hear some great music. And look. I was talking to Pat Thomas about doing the show yesterday. We were talking. I said, Pat, I'm going to interview Tom Gracyk. He said, oh, that's great. Well, Tom's got some strong opinions. Not that Pat doesn't. Right?
And I want Pat Thomas to interview me.
Well, I'll do the best I can, and next time we'll have Pat. So my days as a journalist and radio host are long past. I'm hoping I'm doing a good job. And by the way, Jeff's right. If you have any questions for Tom about this period, I feel like I'm monopolizing the.
Oh, they're either entranced or they've fallen asleep.
Entranced. We vote for entranced. No, we're enjoying the story, the timeline. So
okay, yeah, because it was early days.
It was, and it was. So by the reason I bring up the opinionated thing, it's not just a non sequitur, but the fact that I think we all were, as much as we were friends and we hung out with you, we were also a little intimidated, or at least wanted to impress you because you were there first, because you knew about things. So I think that
I was a little bit older, and I don't think I was being a jerk about it, but I was definitely saying, oh, come on, this is the way. I mean, how can you deny the power of this record? Can put the Peter Gabriel guy, what a wimp. Come on, get a life.
Well, hey, those records, I've been listening to those records a lot lately, and they hold up. I have no problem with that.
Okay.
Yeah. Peter Gabriel. But that aside, because hey, I play in a prog psychedelic band now, so
that's true.
Looking for, as it turns out, strangely enough. No, I mean, but I remember not just maybe the music all of us were into. Everybody had their skeletons in their closet and something they might in 1977 not be proud to have been into. But even more than that, when punk rock and new wave happened, there were always red herrings along the way, bands that you thought might be the cool one. I remember, like, say, the Fabulous Poodles or something like that, who weren't the worst band in the world. But I remember you would be the one to steer away from, no. Forget this Fabulous Poodle stuff and listen to this instead. Or listen, don't listen to Pearl Harbor and the Explosion, or listen to the Pretenders. Or it was always some kind of thing where you kept us on track, and you would say, if someone plays something on their show, you let them have it. As music director, you'd say it's like, oh, what's that garbage? But that kept, you did.
When Ken Gold brought back the B-52's Rock Lobster, and I got sick of hearing it every hour, I was like, oh, come on, this is just getting out of hand. I don't know if you remember that.
I don't. That's funny.
Yeah, again, there was a bit of an LA influence coming up.
Well, we were all looking for things, and I think that
we were all looking.
Yeah, we were all.
But I was also being fed things as a music director. I was getting lots of records in the mail, and they'd get phone calls from the record labels, and they'd say, "Hey, we got this hot new band here, blah 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 blah. Hey, why don't you come see them in San Francisco? They're playing the old Waldorf. Hey, we're gonna have dinner with them, blah blah blah." And then you'd find out that, hey, Angel City actually has a couple of good hard rock songs. I mean, if you want to listen to Cheap Trick, you could also play this song here. And but on the other hand, there's a guy named Kenny Ryback who's still out there. He was a independent promo guy. He worked for Acoin Management, who was the brains behind selling Kiss to America. And when the Kiss guys put out solo albums at the same time, there were 4 solo Kiss albums that came out. He used to call me every week and say, "Oh, come on, Tom, these Kiss albums, you got to add them to KDVS, man." Because, I mean, the Gene Simmons, the Paul, each one is a great album, and I really would like a report on this. If your report in the Gavin showed these records, man, that would be so. And I'm just like, no, stop calling me. No. Don't call me anymore. I will never. No. And he would call me every week.
Oh, man.
Are you playing those Kiss records yet? And I'm like, no, they're not even in the bins. The DJs have no access to them. And I still know the guy 45 years later, and we laugh about it now.
Yeah, now.
So, I definitely was trying to steer through the minefields.
No, what got into the bins, and like, as much as I joke about being on a strict playlist at Eucalyptus, we had a playlist at KDVS in that only the best of the best got added to I can still see those little wooden bins behind the turntables in the DJ booth. And it wasn't a large selection. Like, things got whittled down to things you, and really only you, determined was good enough to be played on the station. You were the barometer.
Yeah, I determined which new records went into the bins, and then I would try and steer people to certain songs. But everybody was also listening to the radio station at the time, so they would hear the best songs and say, "That is a great song. I'm going to play that on my next show."
Right.
Because everybody was on the air once a week. And so if there was a new Clash song that was just, this is amazing, I can't wait to play London Calling on my show, then, you're going to hear London Calling every day on KDVS. Yeah. And you weren't hearing Linda Ronstadt and the Eagles anymore.
I have a question for both of you guys. In talking about the radio station, did you guys have callers call in and give you feedback on what you guys were?
Oh, yeah, we had fans. The DJ we were sitting there alone in the booth, and if we wanted to answer the phone, and there were some DJs
calls, I would take.
Yeah, you would ask.
Well,
it wasn't a call in, but people would call with requests. Although I never asked for requests. Some people asked for a lot of requests, and somewhere along the line, you'd still get people calling. I remember for a couple of years, every Wednesday night, some guy would call up and request Shady Grove by Quicksilver Messenger Service. It's like, every couple of weeks I'd play it.
Oh,
just
no.
He's a dedicated listener. And then I remember at the end of my tenure there that we used to play Fish Heads by Barnes and Barnes. You remember that? It was, it was a novelty song, but it was, we played some novelty type stuff. And I remember the last show I did, these 2 little girls, high school girls, came in. They were fans, and they presented me with this nicely wrapped little box that I opened up, and it was a couple of plastic fish heads because they loved that song, and they used to request it.
That's great.
It's like, yes. So people would call. You would get some feedback. Nobody ever called up and said, "Hey, man, why aren't you playing the Eagles anymore?" They would say,
I don't think so. Yeah.
They would say, hey, play that Nick Lowe record again, man. That was really good.
It's funny that you mentioned that, Tom, because that's how I actually came to know the Paisley Underground, was because I was the guy calling in our local college radio station, KKSM, in San Marcos Palomar Community College. I was the one asking for KKK Took My Baby Away from the Ramones. And while I was every week, and while I was waiting for the DJ Art Deco to play the song, in my own time came from the 3 o'clock, and that was my introduction to Paisley Underground. So I was that guy. I was the one calling every week requesting a song. Not quick.
Yeah.
Quick Messenger.
Not Quicksilver. No.
Not
Quick.
not Linda Ronstadt Quicksilver.
So the DJ you listened to, his name was Art Deco, right?
That's what he went by. Yes.
And I'd forgotten, but Russ Tolman was on the air for years.
Yes.
But he used the name Dexter Deadbolt, and I got to ask him why he did that, or where that.
Dexter W. Deadbolt.
Oh, okay. Steve, did you ever think that you needed an alias on? I don't remember you having a fake name.
No, I never. I don't know why Russ gave him so. I mean, I know he was simultaneously to being a DJ at KDVS. He was on. What station was it in town? The country station where was it KFAT? No, it was programmed by the music director of KFAT, a guy named Gordy. It's KYLO. KYLO
for Yolo County.
Right.
And yeah, he got me on there in 1980. I was doing weekends, but it was completely automated.
Right.
So
you just watched the machines.
Yeah, you made sure you were babysitting the machines and cutting all the introductions, back announcing, but it was all taped. Your back announce would be taped, and you would hit the tape. And at that point, I don't know why, but I had a fake DJ name. I was the Urbane Cowboy.
The Urbane. I don't remember that. Okay, but I remember.
Yeah, you may have left by then.
No.
Did you leave early in 80?
So I left like May or June of 80 to move back to LA. But I remember going by and visiting Russ there, and he was Ranger Russ over there. So he was big on the alias. Yeah. He was Ranger Russ. Dexter. I never thought of having an alias, but I do. I laugh a lot now because my show, as you know, is called 3 Minute Rock and Roll, and it was kind of a funny thing for me because I'd like to think I had pretty good music taste throughout, all my life, and I was, my favorite bands were the Who and whatever other bands, and Roxy Music was my number one favorite band by that point, but.
Creedence Clearwater Revival.
Creedence, yeah, but the fact is, through mainly a lot because of Roxy and things like that, I kind of had my prog side, and I will admit to having had a few Yes and even ELP records in high school and stuff like that. So I was, into the prog a little bit, and the fact that I decided, okay, that's over now, and everything has to be under 3 minutes, and I really kept to that. Nothing on my show would be over 3 minutes. That was my thing. So pretty strange.
I think I did contribute a little. I did turn up my nose when you exhibited those tendencies. I will admit. The
progs, well, no, but I quickly pushed those to the side. I it was over overnight. Never liked that. But of course, and I still don't play. I don't listen to much Yes and no ELP. But the reality is.
But of course now,
hey, look,
we do listen to all those bands.
Well. I haven't circled back to ELP. By the way, I saw an interview. I mean, Nick Cave says his main influences are Gentle Giant and ELP and Yes. So,
right,
whatever that tells you. But the funny thing is, for Mr. 3 Minute Rock and Roll, my last album, the opening track was 20 minutes long. So I guess I guess I kind of got over that.
Yeah, and don't forget, eventually everyone ends up listening to the Grateful Dead.
You're right. It's true. I don't know how that happened.
But, we didn't play the Grateful Dead on KDVS per se. I mean, they had been playing them, along with the LA stuff that they were playing. But I was a huge Dead fan, but then they got so bad. And you looked around and you said, well, these new bands are so much better. And it wasn't even a choice. I mean, they were just out. But the Grateful Dead were much more in sync with what the UC Davis crowds were interested in. I don't know. I did get some blowback. I reviewed for the Cal Aggie when I reviewed their show in Sacramento in early '78. I ended up getting some letters to the editor.
Oh yeah, I remember.
How dare he? He obviously doesn't know what he's talking about. The Deaders are the best. And but I think I pretty much ignored them my whole time on KDVS. I mean, we just wasn't a factor. We were trying to get away from that.
We were very just disciplined in what we were all about, and by the time we left in 1980, by the time we broke up the old gang of mine, Kendra and I moved to LA. You did shortly after. We'd kind of all I don't know. I feel like we kind of had this shared aesthetic. Of course, we all like things each of us liked and had, differences in our taste and all that. But we kind of were just, behemoth. I know because I remember the old guard of DJs at KDBS were kind of either intimidated by or annoyed by us after a while because we were this mafia of what we consider ourselves to be tastemakers. So fast forward, because I know we could go on with Davis forever. I could, because I have romantic memories of David. But fast forward, you moved to LA, and you're living down in Los Angeles now in the same city as me and Kendra. We're working in record stores together, actually living together in LA in the down there basement.
Yes, I got to live down there for a while.
That's right. That's a exciting. Well, you lived in the down there, the basement of my dad's house for 6 months, something like that, for a while.
Yeah, until I found an apartment of my own and moved to the Valley because I was working in the Valley at Moby Disc. And I remember sometimes we used to listen to KNAC out of Long Beach. I think sometimes we would try and didn't they have a lunchtime new wave program, and we used to try and get home and be there at noon to listen to them play the Jam and stuff like that.
Wow.
Do you remember that?
No, I don't. That's funny. I don't remember that.
Yep.
Yeah, we used to do that occasionally. Yeah, down there.
Yeah, that was a good hangout. That was
the
original down there resident. You were the intern before that.
Yeah, there's a podcast about that somewhere.
I know.
Down there thing. It's crazy the way these things have gotten so niche. I mean,
Well, Down There Records is coming back in 2022, and that's all I can say about that right now. But there's a little scoop, so that's more about that later. But okay, so you're in LA now, and not to make it all about me and the scene, but it is the theme of the show. You start to see within a couple of years all your old friends making records and getting out there. Suddenly there's alternate learning, ultimately game theory, Thin White Rope, and Dream Syndicate, and True West, and all this stuff's happening all of a sudden there. And what do you think about all this? Is it weird?
Well, I was in a different position then to support the music in that working at Moby Disc, I was buying the records for the stores and selling them, and it wasn't as big an influence as playing the music on the radio for people or promoting shows, but people would come in and they would, I can remember, when REM first came around, and by then I'd built up a clientele where people would say, yeah, it's like when we used to go to Rather Ripped and we'd say to Ray Farrell, hey, what's great this week? And people would come in, I'm like, oh, you got to get this record, Chronic Town.
Mm-hmm.
And of course we stocked all the Paisley Underground stuff. It's like, oh yeah, the Salvation Army, man, these guys are, they're hot. And you got to, and hey, my buddy here, the Dream Syndicate have this EP. It's really good.
Yeah.
I think you'll, you might like this. So, and all those bands, we definitely, as an LA independent record store, and as we got bigger, there were several locations. We definitely, that was one angle. We definitely pushed local music because we could sell it. But mostly we sold Jethro Tull and Pink Floyd. And at one point I was like, oh man, I don't know if I can do this anymore. When they invented CDs, I definitely had a crisis where I thought, am I going to just sell the same Pink Floyd albums again for another 10 years? Fortunately, it didn't quite work out that way, because then you end up with the alt country scene, and there was a whole other scene that you could push, and True West was out there, and the Long Riders were doing something kind of new, and you could go to the shows and you could tell people about it. And then I had that radio show on K-Rock in the mid 80s, New American Rock, which
I forgot all about
you guys
that.
down there.
Yeah,
you forgot all.
I did, Tom.
The Dream Syndicate there, Concrete Blonde. So yeah, I was on the radio again because there was a DJ called the Swedish Eagle.
Yes,
and he ended up getting heavily into dance music because that's what happened in the 90s. But he always had his eye out for what could be the next big thing. My friends over at Moby Disc seem to think these American bands like the Meat Puppets, or maybe I can get Tom down to play these records once a week at midnight.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that for a couple of years. And then I would we had the Replacements come down. We had interviewed the Smithereens and stuff like Scruffy the Cat we would play. And so again, and we played the 3 o'clock and all those records. And right at the end of the show, they just start playing Duran Duran and the Thompson Twins again. But for that 40 minutes on K-Rock, I was trying to present again, just like I'd done a few years earlier. Hey, there's good music out there that isn't synthesizer based. Here's some of it, and they're playing at the Palomino this week. You can go see Firehose, and they're great.
Right.
And here's the new Firehose record, and so that's a little after the Paisley scene, but it was still, again, the Dream Syndicate with that, the late '80s indie rock, college alternative, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So I still felt that I was contributing there, either because I was able to sell the records to some people, or and I was also writing a column monthly for Scott's Tissue. It was a little industry fanzine.
Yeah.
And I was doing the same exact thing. I was saying, they were pushing Tom Petty because that was their big thing, but they had a page with me saying, hey, here's Scruffy the Cat, and the Minutemen have turned into Firehose, and you should listen. And, again, I did that for a while. So I've always tried to contribute in the direction that I thought was better for people, even if I had to kind of sneer at them and say, no, put that down, and you really should listen to this.
And you would do that. I know that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And, I never told someone, oh, don't buy Jethro Tull, buy REM, but it did develop in that way anyway. And so, it's just part of, I don't know about unheralded. I was just one of those guys behind the scenes, behind the front lines, helping it happen in that direction.
And now Freakbeat, you're in a place where you actually, I seem to me more conducive because it's more focused to the kind of audience. Am I wrong?
No, you're very wrong.
Oh no. I feel like now you're working in the cool hippest store in LA with the hippest clientele. I guess I go at the wrong times.
Post-pandemic, some of our audience is aging out. Now, I met Jeff a couple weeks ago. He came into the store.
That's great.
I sold him, and here I'm going to plug my new book, which I never thought I'd be able to do. But I contributed to Go Further, more literary appreciations of power pop. And I had all these photos from back at KDVS when I would interview the Ramones and the Pop and the Rubinoos, and I would take some pictures, and I still had them. And they had done this book called Go All the Way. And I said, yeah, this book, I kind of liked it, but I hate getting a music book that doesn't have any photos in it. And I've got photos of all these bands. Yeah. And the guy was like, let me get back to you. And sure enough, they did a sequel, and they used 16 of my photos, plus the cover photo of the Knack, which we saw together at the UC Davis Rec Hall.
Yep.
Anyway, and so Jeff came in and said, hi, I'm Jeff. And I said, oh, here, I didn't say buy my book, but I said, this is what I've done recently. And he found some interesting record. I think he bought a Big Star tribute album, in fact.
Oh, I did, yeah.
But Jeff is not our mainstay customer like it was 10 years ago. Now, since the pandemic and since Amoeba Records in Hollywood got closed for a year, they got stuck moving their location. We got a whole new crowd now. We get a lot of 20 and 30 something kids who are, vinyl is back. I don't know if you've heard this, but
I heard cassettes
there's been
back.
A resurgence. I'm not going there. So at this point, it's just my job is trying to make sure we have all the latest hip hop records on back order so that when they actually do get pressed up again, we'll have Kanye West in stock. And just like in 1991, I was not real jazzed to be selling Will Smith, DJ Jazzy Jeff CDs. This year, I'm not real hip to say. I don't care if I sell Willow Smith's album to people, but that's what I'm reduced to now. I mean, One Bright Light,
yes,
is all the reissues of music from the 70s and 80s, mostly coming from England. The box sets that people like Grapefruit and Esoteric do are just fantastic. And some, again, but we've gone full circle to some of the music that we hated back then because it just became out of date.
Yeah.
And now it sounds pretty good because it's before disco and before sequencers and people were actually playing instruments.
Right.
So no, it's a good time for record stores in that there are people coming in to buy vinyl, but it's very hard to get a lot of vinyl because there aren't enough pressing plants. There were some record stores that went out of business in LA because of the pandemic. I mean, we've been doing great, but it's not the same anymore. In fact, and some of our customers have aged out. I mean, I don't know of too many that have died, but some of them move away. We've been buying a lot of record collections from people. Their 70s and 80s records are worth a lot of money now, and they're finally deciding, I don't need these anymore. I found this Steve Hillage streaming somewhere. I guess I can get rid of the records. Yeah. But yeah, 7-inch singles.
Which, by the way, is I'm proud to say is one of the I think I was the contributor to most of the stock at Freak Beat when you guys opened. Because
yes, Steve sold us his record collection early on. Of course, it would be worth 2 or 3 times as much now, but we paid
2 or
fairly.
3.
And Steve was also the first performer that we had at Freak Beat. We had a stage, and he came in and did a solo show. We've had many people perform. We had reunion shows by the 3 o'clock years ago, and we had one of the last American shows by the Muffs. Hi, Ronnie. And hey, Ronnie. I hope Ronnie made it this far.
and you also had the 3x4 signing party, right? That I couldn't get out for.
Yes, and I tried to get Dennis Duck to rep for the Dream Syndicate, because we had Vicky Peterson and Danny Benair and Michael Quercio, I think. And I tried to get Dennis, but it was Thanksgiving time, and he had a family obligation. He was going to be out of town. Because, of course, Dennis and I were hanging at the club where Mushroom used to play. Pat Thomas it's just the same. These are the 5 people that will be listening to this podcast. We've just named them.
Oh, come on.
More than that.
Because I'm going to say that, because I know we're near the hour mark, and I'm not sure how tight we are on the time thing, but I will say to bring after the gloom and doom you just placed into the whole picture here, I'm going to say you still are in a position, much as you were 45 years ago, to turn somebody on to some kind of music that will change their life and maybe get them to start a band. And I will cite just one: you selling White Light, White Heat to Miley Cyrus could possibly eventually change your direction at some point, because that happened, right?
That did happen. It was I think, and the funny thing was, Robert Hilburn was in the store at the same time. We were doing a book signing with him. I forget which book. Oh, his Johnny Cash book had just come out. So Bob Hilburn was there signing books, and it was getting late because everybody he was so gracious talking to everybody. So in the meantime, Miley Cyrus and a handler show up, and she's got all these records, and maybe it's still on YouTube somewhere. Some old guy selling Miley Cyrus a bunch of records, and yes, White Light, White Heat was one of them. She bought a few other hip records.
Wow, I got to look that up on YouTube.
Yeah, and just before the pandemic, I think one of the Kardashians was in with a posse, but they didn't buy any hip records.
Oh, okay.
I think it was Kendall Jenner. Is she one of them?
I think she's one of the younger ones.
Okay, yeah, she and her posse came in and bought a lot of records, but not as hip as Miley. I got to give Miley that.
They weren't buying Trap Mask Replica or something like that.
No, they're basically her friends were telling her, "Oh, you got to get this record here," and it wasn't Big Star.
Okay, no. Well,
Okay.
Do you guys have more questions? Because I know we're near the witching hour of the Tom Gracyk tribute show. But are there things that you guys are curious about?
Well, I wanted to follow up on some new stuff, but I'm glad, Tom, that you brought up the book. So not only is your name credited for the book, but I've seen your name listed in several albums, including the Dream Syndicate, the Complete Live at Raji's, as photo.
Yes.
So you've had several photo credits.
Yeah, again, it was part of my contribution to the scene. I had access in Davis to the dark room on campus because I was doing getting a design degree. And then in the mid 80s in the San Fernando Valley, I started taking photo classes at Pierce College, which is one of those community colleges, which are actually just high school with ashtrays. But I was able to use their dark room for 3 years until they finally said, okay, you're going to have to actually structure some kind of program here to get a degree. And I'm like, that's too much work. I'm done with the dark room. So I got it. But yeah, I was shooting the Dream Syndicate then. And And maybe someday there'll be a book about the 80s college rock scene, and my Yola Tango photos at the lingerie will be out there. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's amazing how this stuff is starting to pop up. But again, it's such a limited audience, but there are so many avenues for everything. When I found out about this podcast, I scrolled through the episodes. It was fascinating and frightening. I think these guys are stalkers. I know some of these people. I know of all these people, but I want to listen to the Bangles hairdresser episode. I hope I live so long. I don't know.
It's
amazing.
It's a great show. I'm a fan, and you guys are great that this exists. And I'm gonna tell you something. I don't agree. I know that more than just you, me, Pat, and Ronnie are listening for a fact. So I'll tell you that right now. But I'll tell you a quote I read this morning that blew my mind, and I think this kind of ties into all of this, to what I do, to what what all four of us do. I was listening to Momus this morning, the Scottish artist, and I started reading about him, as I often do, and I went to his Wikipedia page and articles, and he had a quote I'd never heard before that I thought was fantastic, that is very inspirational. And he said this 30 years ago, before the internet. He said, in the future, everybody will be famous for 15 people. A variation on the Warhol quote.
Yeah, very good.
And that's perfect.
Good old moments.
In the future, everybody will be famous for 15 people. You know what? That's good enough for me.
Well, Tom, I do have a question for you, because I need you to know that I was a loyal Moby Disc customer. I am a Valley girl, and Moby Disc was my place to discover new music. So please, I just want you to know, not everyone was buying the same Pink Floyd or Jethro Tull album. It was my place to go, and it felt like the only place I could go to find it in the Valley, in a land of licorice pizzas and other places. Moby Disc was really my volume.
Well, thank you. We definitely did we were pushing the Paisley Underground type stuff the whole way, and yeah, we were local boosters, and that was my contribution at the time. Again, but then I also was dabbling in a bit of writing, photography, DJ work, and that's what I've always enjoyed doing, mainly so I could get free records.
To this day.
Oh no, there's no free records anymore.
Well, I wanted to ask just a question and kind of bring it back to the Paisley Underground for a second. So since you are a person with very strong opinions, and I want to hear one of them, and that is, what made this Paisley Underground scene? Because, Jeff and I, you can call us stalkers, obsessed, super fans, whatever you want to say. But for us, this scene really had an impact on us. And we're not the only ones. Trust me, there's more than 15 people that agree with what we're saying. But what was it about this scene that came on, really caught your attention? Or what was it about it that caught your attention? And then, other trends came and other things happened. But what was it that grabbed you?
Again, just like at UC Davis, it was an organic scene that just grew out of people meeting each other, having shared interests, and then having an avenue, whether it was a record store to get their records in, or a club that would let them play on a Thursday night, or a barbecue that everybody would get together on, was it Saturday or Sunday?
Sunday.
Yeah. I never got to go because I always had to work.
They were fun.
Yeah. So again, I don't know, Steve, there was nothing but a natural growth, I thought, it seemed to me. And if you were interested, you were accepted and you were there. And if you weren't, you moved on to different things. But
and you were there for a lot of those early shows, weren't you? I mean,
yeah. Oh yeah. Oh man, I can remember talking to you at 3 a.m. on the phone after a show at the Music Machine, and you'd occasionally, I'm sure you were just so adrenalized, you would call me up like, so how was the show tonight?
I did. You're right. Almost every show I would call you up. Yes.
Yeah, we would either hang out after the show at Arlene's and get apple fritters and talk about the show or about the people there or the other bands, and usually, those early Dream Syndicate shows, you never knew. I mean, occasionally they would crash, but you would always go hoping it would be magic, which it usually was. I mean, the shows, uh, again, it was magic. And every once in a while, the shows were a little sloppy and would degenerate into not the greatest night. I'd be kind of embarrassed to have brought somebody this night. But other nights, it was a show like, I've never seen anything like that. I'd have to go again.
And we would be, I think, it's intentionally unhinged and pushing it to the point where I would, we're and that was, I think what made the shows often great or often not so great. And I do remember, you're right, Tom. I would regularly call you after almost every show back then and say, well, what happened? What did you experience? Because I was inside my head the whole time. So tell me, please.
Yeah, or you were outside your body.
Well,
you had no idea what was going
exactly
on.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, the shows where Carl would climb up onto the amps and jump off during the middle of a solo. I mean, hopefully he would stay in key, or the feedback would fit in. So yeah, when it did, it was just the most amazing thing.
Wow. Well, this is very enlightening for me, Stephen. I'm glad that you suggested this, because I didn't realize what a huge tastemaker and influence that Tom was.
Oh no, let's just hear it for the little people.
Yes, by all means. So, Tom, with that being said, as our resident tastemaker on the scene now, is there anything that you would recommend that's current to us?
Oh God, no. I mean, I try to stay away from listening to all the Grateful Dead shows that are on re-listen. I mean, you can listen to anything in the world.
Current.
Current. I mean, I look forward to hoping the next Wilco album rocks out or something. I mean, they're one of the best bands in the world right now, but sometimes they put out sleepy records, and I want them to rock harder, and I hope for that. So I'm always listening. But I don't get many free records at all anymore. So if something we hear about is interesting, we have Spotify at the store and we listen to it that way. And when a record like a band like King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard comes along, and they have some really good albums, and then you get free tickets to see them at the Palladium, and you go, and unfortunately they're not very good. They're like,
oh
wait,
really?
they have three guitar players, and they didn't jam at all. They did 3 and 4 minute songs, and we're like, what about those psychedelic albums where they do the 10-minute songs? How come they're not doing that? And so you never know what it's going to be like. I still, before the pandemic, I was seeing a lot of music going out. Now I don't know. I don't know what the scene will be like, or if I'm really that worried about it. I mean, it got to the point where it's like, oh, the Minutemen are playing again. Yeah, I've seen them all like 8 times. I don't need to. What happened to D Boone? Oh shit! Wow, man, I should have gone to see him.
Oh yeah, there wasn't that much time.
Yeah, it's like, so at this point, it's like, maybe I won't go see Wilco next time they come around, because like I've seen him half a dozen times. But it's hard to say what's going to happen going forward. I don't have a lot of recommendations for people anymore, other than some of the great psychedelic reissue things that have come out in box sets that, or of course, I've always enjoyed CD bonus tracks, and you get the Steve Wynn box set, and it's got 4 discs of stuff you've never heard before.
Yeah.
It's like, this is great. I mean, I got to remember to listen to that 4th disc sometime.
a lot of stuff
worn out.
Well, there's a new Dream Syndicate record next year, so hopefully that'll be something you recommend to the Kardashians.
Yes. Oh, definitely stocking that one.
So speaking of that, Steve, we had before we let you go, that we had a few quick take things that we wanted to ask you about. Starting with the new Dream Syndicate, how did those sessions go? Last time we talked to you, you were getting ready to head to Virginia. Mm-hmm. Anything that you could tell us about how they went?
It went great, really, really great. I mean, we spent I think 7 days together out there, and we recorded and over everything. We're going to mix in a few weeks. It's going to come out next year. We have a label, but I can't quite say yet. But it's all being set for probably a summer release on the new album. But the funny thing about it is the song that will probably be the lead-off track was a new song I brought in that we recorded. It was the first thing we played together on the first day after not having seen each other or played together after a year and a half. And we got in,
Wow.
we settled in, picked up the guitars. Chris Kakavas wasn't with us because he couldn't come over from Germany, sadly. He added a lot long distance, but me and Mark and Jason and Dennis settled in, got our sounds, picked up our instruments, and played this new song and did the first take and said, yep, that's the one. And that was a good start to the session. And from that point on, it was just, I think we were so happy to see each other and so happy to be playing music with each other or with anybody that we just kind of fell into an easy groove. And the record is really, if any record we've done could be called upbeat, I would say this one is. It's kind of a fun and very, the joy is there. You can hear it in the music.
Wow. No 20-minute jams on this one?
No, we kind of went the other direction. I mean, I've always said everything,
What?
everything we've done, 3-minute rock and roll, man.
Oh, there's
There's
there's supposed to be at least one jam per album. Come on, man. Oh.
No, there aren't on every album doesn't have them. This one doesn't, but you know,
They're supposed to.
come see us live. We'll play Wharf Rat.
Yes.
Well, thank you for that, Steve. I appreciate that. So another
we're very,
quick,
very excited about that. We're gonna be doing, and I'm really an idea I have, and I've got to kind of get on it because people are booking shows so far ahead of time. But I always forget the actual. I think October 20th is the 40-year anniversary. Not this October 20th, but in 22, the 40-year anniversary of Days of Wine and Roses, and I really want to play the whiskey on that date. So that's kind of a goal I have in my mind. So let's see if that can happen. I think we've got to play LA that night, and hopefully the whiskey. I don't know why. It just seems like a fun way to have an anniversary party.
You can't reopen the music machine?
Wouldn't that be great? We just play what's there now? Maybe is there an open empty lot, or I don't know.
I think it's an auto parts store.
We'll play the auto parts store then. No, it went great. It was really fun, and we're playing our first and only show of the year in Brooklyn in December with here's a great new band, Eyelids. I mean, we all know about them. They've been around for a while, but they're going to be opening the show, so that's going to be a blast.
Yes.
The one show we're going to do this year.
Yes, and they have Victor Kremenacher from
Camper
Van in the band now too.
That's great. I know. They're such a good band. I mean, you know, I don't know. I think you know, this is me and Tom like having our same point counterpoint debate 40 years later, but I think there's some really great new bands. I mean, and most of them are kind of that sort of psychedelic beyond their years kind of stuff, like, you know, Garcia Peoples and, you know, and Eyelids and other things out there. Like, wait, why are these kids all picking up on this stuff this many years later? But, you know, I got interviewed by for some article, I think for Bandcamp, about psychedelic music, and the guy who did the interview at some point said, well, I'm actually 32 years old, and I sort of just am picking up on your music in retrospect. I'm into the younger psych bands. I went, my God, it's like, that sounds like me talking about the Standells back in the late 70s.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nuggets compilation. Was that Nuggets compilation an influence on you? I think it was, Steve, right? I think you're on.
I can remember playing that on air at KDVS. So we definitely had that at the radio station. I definitely would have told any kids like, oh yeah, you got to check these out. You might remember some of these songs. So definitely an influence on me.
Yeah. Did you pass that along to other people that would like at the radio station or?
Yeah. And then now, of course, Steve gets to hang out with Lenny Kaye, but you know, it's a wiggly world.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. So I think we lost Steve. Steve might be on mute.
I think so. I guess that's the way it ends. The world ends on mute.
Yeah, I think so. So we did want to mention that as this is going to be posting, Steve will be on his house concert tour. So I think for a majority of September, that's going to be happening. And so I think he'll be a couple days into that while this is being released.
I'm back again.
Oh, he's back. Yeah, I was going to say, because it's going to take you till September to edit out half of this interview.
No, I muted myself again, which I seem to do a lot, but I was the one thing I must say about Nuggets that Tom I remember is there was a record store down the hallway from KBS called Zapple Records, and they had Nuggets for $2 on cutout. I think I went and bought all 10 copies and gave them away to people. So I was Johnny Nugget seed at the time.
Was that the Sire reissue with the blue cover? Or was that the original Elektra with the psychedelic cover?
Blue cover.
Yeah, so it was a cutout. Yeah, that of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, we definitely played that record at KDVS, I think.
So we do have a future episode where we're going to be talking about that nugget. So I just wanted to pitch that a little bit.
Great.
So Steve, quick thoughts about the upcoming Dream Syndicate documentary.
It's great. I mean, it's exciting. He worked. Emil Spolder in the Netherlands, working on this for a long time. He interviewed me and a lot of other people involved. Now it's like 4 or 5 years
including
ago.
me.
And Tom is in it, and all kinds of people.
35 pounds heavier.
And what?
35 pounds heavier. Plus, I gave him a dozen or more photos of the Dream Syndicate and Suspects, which I hope are embarrassingly used in the documentary. It'll be interesting. I did make the trailer, so I'm hopeful.
You did.
Yeah,
I'm actually going over to I'm doing a tour of Italy in October, and I'm going to stop in Amsterdam for a couple of days to do a new interview with him, because I feel like I'm not 35 pounds heavier, but a lot's happened since then. So I want to kind of update him. So it's still, but he thinks it's going to happen for next year. So I like to think.
Right.
I know how this year's been the year of Sparks, because they've been everywhere. They had the documentary, they did the movie that came out, and it's great. They're a band that deserves it. I'd like to think next year will be the same for the Dream Syndicate, with our anniversary year and the new record and this documentary coming out, which will be really cool.
I have to jump in with a Sparks story, because we love Sparks, and Bob Say at Freakbeat has Sparks stories. And I don't know if it's the most current, but a recent guitarist for Sparks was a Freakbeat customer.
Ooh.
And we remember the day he came into the show. I can't remember his name, but he'd been a customer for years, and he and his brother had been in some bands, and the sort of aught bands, alternative type. And he came in one day, he goes, "Yeah, I'm going to audition for this band Sparks. I mean, is there anything I should listen to, or is there a good record?" And we're like, "Huh? Okay, let's see if we have any Sparks here." And we sold him, 1 or 2 Sparks records. And I saw him the next year playing with them at the El Rey. They were great. And I don't know if he's in the Annette film or not. I may see it this weekend. And so yeah, we do have a little influence still, even when people just want the new Kanye West vinyl, which isn't out yet. It's digital only. Leave us alone.
So once again, Tom, the unsung hero, the influence upon rippling waves of music out there everywhere.
Amazing.
Thank you. Amazing. Yeah. Thank you, Steve.
All right, Steve.
The defense rests.
Yeah. I made a note to talk to Soraya after you guys after you guys hang up, to note that this was almost like a case. And I think Steve definitely brought a compelling argument for sure.
Well, great.
So one last thing, Steve, before we let you go, and I don't want to slide over the fact that you had mentioned Down There 2022. We can't let that go.
Like that.
What's happening?
I'm not to be caged.
He said he can't say anymore.
I can't say much more about it, but let's say there will Down There will be involved in the new record. But I can't. There's not much more to say than that. But we're going to revive the imprint, because it's again the 40-year anniversary, so it's a good time to bring it all back where it came from.
Fair enough.
Watch this space.
Tom, I'm sad to say you can't move back into the Down There offices anymore, because my father sold the place. So.
Oh, I should have used the pool more when I had the chance.
I know.
Well, I wanted to thank you both for coming on, and Steve, of course, this is an amazing idea. Tom, thank you for accepting this stalker's face.
Yeah, it was
nice
to meet you in person beforehand, and Soraya, hopefully I'll mew someday, and
absolutely,
maybe I'll remember you from the Moby Disc days. I don't know.
Oh, I doubt it, but I'll delude myself into thinking that you will.
Okay.
Well, yes, thank you both so much, and we really appreciate it. Steve, definitely a very compelling argument. Tom, it's so great to learn the impact that you have made on the scene that's so important to us.
Guilty as charged.
All right. Well, thank you guys.
All right.
Thanks for you guys for providing a forum for this. This is great, really fun, and it's strange to be able to talk to Tom. I had to bring him on the show, so I hope to see all of you in person really soon.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
fun.
I think we have to say this case is closed.
This brings it all back to television. That's good.
Yeah.
Nice, very nice. All right.
Thank you both.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Talk to you all
Bye-bye.
later. Bye. Yes, indeed. Okay. Bye.
Wow, Soraya, how did you like the Steve Wynn Paisley Stage Raspberry and Rhyme show? I mean, I think the prosecutor rests, right? The case is closed.
Look, I think our jury deliberation is going to be quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
Look, Steve Wynn presented a very, very strong case for Tom's involvement, and more than involvement, his impact on the development of Paisley Underground, or at least as it moved down from Northern California.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the fact that there were so many people that you use the word tastemaker, and I think that was really the appropriate term for Tom, because he really did kind of share new music, different directions, got people listening to different things. And then we saw that ripple effect, Kendra, Russ, Steve. And, then they relocate to Los Angeles. He's still doing that. And I like, Tom kept using the phrase, I was still contributing, or that was my contribution. And I think just that term itself is really, I'm sorry, I can't think in English right now, menospreciando. It's underestimating or undercutting what he really did. It was really a strong contribution. And then if you think about, okay, well, turning these people onto this music, or, the one thing I wrote down that is that I want to see that. Was he said in fall of 77, there were a bunch of new rave records. There was like a compilation released by Sire that the radio station got. And he just said, here, I'll kind of take these home.
Right.
And I'm thinking, okay, now I want to research what came out in 77, because that's such a pivotal year for punk.
Right.
And really kind of changing, or at least bringing in the rumblings of new wave, and then this coffee house scene, this Davis coffee house, and all these people that make their way through Davis, but really making their way in and having some sort of following is really, Tom's got a hand in some of it. He may see it as, oh, it was just my contribution. No, I think he really set a really interesting scene. And then, moving into LA, and he was contributing photos or contributing writing. And, he was a buyer. Moby Disc was my record store growing up.
Oh, okay. I didn't
So in my part of the valley, I had a Moby Disc relatively close by. And so, I had a big brother that drove 2 years before I did. And so if he went to go record shopping and, he was home, I was going with him. And then when I started driving, I went to Moby Disc, and it was across the street from my local mall. And that's where I went to buy my records. And little did I know that by supporting an independent record seller, I was getting independent music. I was getting things that weren't mainstream. I was listening to shows on K-Rock. I remember this New Wave Hour.
Wow.
I seem to recall it now. Now I gotta dig deep, but I think Tom's contribution is a little much stronger than I think he paints it. In other words, I think Steve Wynn's argument is cogent, and I agree with him. So this juror finds in favor.
Guilty. Yeah. So listening to this conversation, it made me think how important non-musician players are in this whole scene, whether it be photographers, writers, DJs, promoters. I mean, specifically, we're talking about Tom.
Right.
But I think it also, there's a bigger conversation too with the impact that other people have in the scene besides just the musicians. So
right.
whether it be the Bengals hairdresser or what have you, right? I mean, there's a lot of players, and obviously in this case, Tom was a huge influence, so much so that if it wasn't for Tom, Game Theory, Dream Syndicate, Thin White Rope, True West, they may be Eagles tribute bands if it wasn't for Tom. I don't know, but obviously his impact by exposing these youngsters, maybe a year or two, three younger than Tom was himself, to this kind of music that was a huge influence on this whole scene and on all these bands that were there.
Yeah, I'm not going to say any more than that. I absolutely agree. And, the fact that, Jeff and I both have copies of this book where Tom has a contribution, Go Further.
The cover.
Yeah, cover art by Tom Gracyk. And plus all these fantastic photos in here, 2020, Ramones, The Knack, Rubenus, Flaming Groovies, and more to come. He's got Yola Tango photos from Club Lingerie. I'm like, okay, when do we get a private viewing of those? But see, I think it goes to show you that when there's good music to be listened to, the bands aren't the only ones that can tell the story. The fans tell a different story from a different perspective. But then you've got the people way behind the scenes, people like programming in radio stations, because, what did he say? He said initially, sorry, I had to write it down. Initially, a 7-inch by the Ramones got thrown out.
Can you believe that?
The station, I'm thinking, what?
I know, right?
How did that happen?
Right.
But then again, you got to think, Ramones come in. This station had been playing, Grateful Dead and other things, and here comes a sound that's very different. Just, it's hard to categorize what it is, and someone just goes, crap, trash.
Yikes.
And then he said, I knew this is, Tom said, I knew I had to help change the direction of things. And so it's when people have this kind of vision, like this music speaks to me, and this is why. People need to hear it. And then it's literally a ripple effect because, as Steve said, I was listening to Tom's show or the other DJs, him and Kendra, public affairs director, public affairs. And then, she's, oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Okay. And then she became a DJ.
Mm-hmm.
And then, because when I think of Kendra Smith, I only think of her as a musician.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think about how or what kind of turned her on, what spoke to her musically. I just think of her as a musician. And then I hear this completely different story and I say, okay, so then this Davis scene,
Yes.
I got a whole education about the Davis scene today.
Yeah.
And I have to thank Tom for that and thank Steve for that.
Yeah.
Because I have very limited knowledge. And now the portrait is bigger now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of Paisley Underground, the Davis scene, and then, flowing into the LA scene. And I'm sorry, I gotta say it. Steve Wynn had a show called 3 Minute Rock and Roll. 3 minutes?
Right? Of all people.
That's one guitar solo on the last song.
Right.
But see, like, this is what's so interesting to me is like, and then when he said, when he used the word, now I'm in a prog psych band.
Yeah.
Like, he is.
He is. Yeah.
He
He really is. Yep. Absolutely.
But more than that, I really also liked the friendship between the two of them. And I really enjoyed listening to this kind of trajectory of a scene in Davis that makes its way down here and the other projects that Tom goes into. And it's just really cool to hear. And then let's mention a couple of things that we heard down there making a return in 2022.
Yes.
Dream Syndicate has a show this year at the end of this year.
Brooklyn.
But also solo tour, new Dream Syndicate record.
Yes.
And were you surprised that he said first song, lead off track, first take, done deal?
Wow.
Not a surprise to me anymore.
After a couple of years of being dormant or close to that, right?
Honey, plug and play like your lives depended on it and have fun.
Yeah. And Steve requested that Tom push that to the Kardashians next time that they come in the Freak Beat. So
Bloody hell. Please.
I think Tom would only do that if he likes it. And Tom was not afraid to say what he did and didn't like about
Correct.
it, right?
Correct.
So I don't think it's a gimme that Tom's automatically going to be trying to push the Dream Syndicate. It's got to be worth it. And if any of the last 3 records are any indication, I'm sure it will most definitely be worth pushing.
Yeah.
So this was definitely an eye opener. So I have to admit, when we first got the suggestion from Steve that we have to have Tom Gracyk on the show
because he's ground zero,
right? We both shrugged our shoulders and said, "Okay, really? We need to hear about this." So,
see, this is why, as my grandma said, you learn something new every day.
Amen.
You and I may be. What was the term Tom used? Stalkers.
Oh, did I tell you when I walked into Freak Beat, the first thing after I introduced myself, he said, "Oh, so you're the Danny Bonaire stalker." Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
But see, like, maybe he lovingly calls us stalkers, but I think it's precisely because we really have a sincere love for this moment in music in LA, for this scene. We have barely scratched the surface.
Yes.
And this is what, we're
41.
well into the 140 episodes.
Yes. So we're approaching 150 here.
Son of a gun. See, 150. Still en pañales, still starting out.
Still at the beginning.
There you go. Hey, man. More people come forward. More people want to let us sit and chit chat with them and hear things.
And people,
we're all here for it.
People like Permanent Green Light, Long Riders, Dream Syndicate, still putting music out that's relevant.
Yeah.
Amazing. So definitely.
And Rain Parade coming out with new music.
Yes, let that happen, Soraya.
Man. And then did you also notice going back to the Red Cross photo?
Yes.
With Roy in it.
Yes.
I don't know. I have a feeling Tom's got lots and lots and lots of photos.
Yes.
That one day he may just have to let us look at the photos.
Yeah, let's
make an online library of one of the two. But anyway,
let's stalk Tom Gracyk and find his.
There you go, Tom Gracyk. Find him. Freak Beat Records, Los Angeles.
Yeah. All right, Soraya.
Oh my gosh, this was a lot of fun, and thanks again to Steve Wynn for the suggestion of the topic, and to Tom Gracyk for coming on very, very graciously and chatting with us and letting us hear the story.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, mi gente, agruviar.
Move on, Paisley people. So I was telling Soraya that this is the Steve Wynn Paisley stage show today.
Well, I want to we set things up, then have you guys sort of, step in but I feel like I got to set the table so we can all sit down and dine together.
Sounds
like that.
good. All right, I'm pulling up my chair. So Steve, take it away.
Are we diving right in?
Sure, let's do it.
All right. Well, to the show, but this
I think you want to mute real quick. Okay.
Oh yeah, you just cut out.
did I really?
Okay. Yeah, let's start over.
I'm not sure why. Okay, I think we had that problem one time before. Let's see. I guess the thing is to hold the phone away from me so I don't touch it. Are we good here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna not get too close to the phone. That's the way to go. I did that one time before. Anyway, do you want to introduce me to set the thing? How do you want to do this?
Sure.
Okay.